All right. Okay. So yeah, that's just the two of us today. It's the APEC meeting for the Object Storage Working Group. We don't have that many agenda items, but there were a few that looked like they could be interesting to talk about. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, you should see the agenda now. Yeah. So there were two items we didn't get to last week because we ran out of time. So I just pulled them over. So let's see. So Jacob and Jason are not on the call, but let's see if we can answer them anyway. Yeah. So one of the questions Jacob asked was if we make a new bucket mandatory, can we do that without waiting for a major version release? Because we have been talking a lot about, can we reduce complexity by just saying we maybe deprecate certain functionality or try to simplify it somehow, but that might require interaction by the customer, of course. So we weren't quite sure what's still viable to do, especially with 15.0 coming up in the end of May, I believe. Yeah, Maureen, you just want to verbalize this?
Yeah, so there are two items I wanted to mention. The first one is new functionality, so new buckets being mandatory. Basically, if you want to do that, we have to make this happen in 15.0. So one of the things that is usually challenging for users, for customers rather, is jumping between versions. So it's not a problem of timing right now, it's the problem of what happens in a year from now. So we still see many customers coming into 14.0 from version 12 or something like that, and they jump versions, and our version matrix is yeah, how do I put this, leaves us kind of vulnerable to missing steps. So when the customers do miss a step, they don't follow the exact versioning policy that we laid out on how do you actually jump in larger steps. That I've seen causes a lot of grief, a lot of problems for support, and then a lot of problems for the customers as well. So if you want to make something mandatory, it will have to happen in 15.0. Communication-wise, this is a problem because if we had something to do, something mandatory to do already, we could have announced it today, and that we would be inside of the policy, right? Like 2 months in advance, people can start preparing that, and whoever jumps will get a deprecation warning. Because what we usually say is, you need to jump to the latest version, to the last version in the major series. So in our case, that would be what, 14.10 something, right? And that would give you all sorts of deprecation warnings, right? Like you need to do this, you need to do, right, like these couple of things before upgrading to 15.0. So I think unless we can put something in already for 14.10, so for the next version, it's going to be a very tight squeeze. So literally we need to start working on this right now. And I need to double check with someone from product to see whether they would be supportive of us doing this right now. So it's doable, right? Like if we ship it with 14.10, it might be okay, but I need to confirm with someone from product whether there is this is not a deprecation, this is a new feature. So theoretically, we would be fine, but I need to confirm that. So I can take an action item for that and get an answer ASAP, so we know exactly whether we can make a new bucket mandatory, which, again, as long as we don't miss the boat of last version in the major release, we should be fine to roll out new functionality.
And to understand better where the question came from, was this about having a unified single bucket into which we store everything that would?
Yes.
Yeah, because that raises the question, if the data is already arranged in a certain way for a customer, they would have to move it all around manually, I guess. Right?
Well, that's the question, right? Like if a question here is only that we create configuration that would make something mandatory so that people have to actually set it up, or I don't know, I'm just gonna, I don't know exactly what Jakob had in mind here, but if the challenge here is only to make something available so that we can build on top of it, then we can do that. Like, I don't think that we'll have some functionality that will do certain things for that bucket. It's more about creating an entry point for us to build on top of it. We can maybe do some various configuration changes automatically based on that and so on. I don't know exactly what Jakob had in mind, but that's why we should have a link for this, so we can cover it next time. But I'll go and ask a couple of people in product to see what they how they feel about adding new configuration as mandatory. But I'm kind of more curious also about something that I read in Slack about making direct upload complete. I think you mentioned that, Matthias.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out what that would mean, because it sounds like because at the end of the day, we're looking for what will we recommend as the direction to follow going forward, right?
Yeah.
And it sounded like that the consensus is it should be direct upload, but it's not considered complete enough to actually support all the kinds of uploads that we have and all the object storage providers that we support. So I guess one item to unpack would be to understand, well, what is missing exactly for it to be considered complete, because I forgot who mentioned it, but I think I totally agree with this, that it's super important. Like if we tell developers and customers as well, hey, you can't use or do this anymore, we need to give them an alternative and point them to something where we say you should be doing that instead. And so whatever that will be, it needs to be working.
Yep. Indeed, and the problem in this case to make direct upload complete is OpenStack, right?
It sounds like it is based on the discussions I've seen so far, but I cannot confirm this. I'm not entirely sure. I saw, yeah, this is actually already, I don't know how you want to approach this, because it kind of relates to the item, agenda item 2 here as well. Maybe we can talk about this now, and then we can back to Jason's question at the end. Because this kind of came up again when I was trying to document background upload. This is something I kind of discovered a bit late in this whole process. I was very focused on direct upload first, and I was trying to understand how does this relate to direct upload? Kind of why does it exist, and are they mutually exclusive, and when should I use what? So this started this discussion about yeah, kind of the cases in which someone, because we already established GitLab, the company for our GitLab.com deployment of GitLab is not using background upload. We use direct upload, as far as I understand, at least. But there are cases where you cannot use direct upload, and you already mentioned OpenStack. One such case, but that's based on a 2-year-old comment in an issue, so I think it's still true, was that there is no appropriate integration for direct upload that we can use, because there is an API we can use, but if the customer has configured this bucket to use a different type of connection, which is a different API object, OpenStack offers, then this will not go down the direct upload routes, and it wouldn't work. So we need to fall back to background upload. So we can't just yank this out, right? Because that would then break someone's setup. So yeah, it's a bit like circular, the whole thing, but this is kind of how this discussion ended up.
Yeah, but you know, that's one thing. Whether we take additional maintenance burden for this, or do we break someone's setup, right? Like ultimately, with every configuration you add, and we have added many, will turn into someone's production configuration and will break something for someone. We have so many users between CE and EE that use GitLab in various forms and fashions that I would be very surprised if we don't break something for someone. It's just, what do we want to take on as a risk for the company, for the application? It doesn't have to even be for the company, right? So if we're talking here about breaking a couple of users' workflow in order to improve stuff for, well, pretty much everyone else, maybe we are okay with that. We just need to make sure we communicate that well. So let me think a bit for a sec. How would we even find out whether someone is using this endpoint?
That's a very good question. There is, we do, I think we do track this with usage ping, the setup. It's just like it might not be, I don't know how reliable this data is, but I do believe we have some data in Sisense around this.
I mean, honestly, any data better than 0 is right. So
I don't know if I can show that here. Maybe not, but I can maybe share a link later.
Yeah. If you give me the link, I can go and look.
Yeah. All right. I'll dig it out. I think I had looked at it before. I also looked at there's also, because the whole customer side and mostly the omnibus and custom chart deployments and all, that's like that's kind of the biggest unknown. But I even found like that for SaaS, it wasn't clear to me anyway, which kinds of integrations we use. And it looks like there's definitely a lot of paths that, let me find this, there's a different merge request here, that seem to be unused. So I looked at, this is just 7 days worth of log events from Kibana, but we actually log whenever we upload to an object storage provider, or also when a file is cached locally, we log an event to specify, well, how did we upload it? And it looks like, at least in this week I looked at, the only cases I encountered was what we call local, which has nothing to do with local storage. That's actually what I'm trying to clear up here. But that's basically when we fall back to disk buffering, which means we just cache the file on disk before it is somehow handled in Rails. And then HTTP means it was a direct upload by Workhorse using an S3 API. I suspect a pre-signed URL. I need to look at it again. So it was a non-multi-part upload to S3. So these were the only 2 cases I encountered in a week worth of log events for SaaS. So I don't know if that helps answer any questions, because there's a bunch of other cases like Go Cloud and then these S3 multi-part requests. So that's the whole other side of it. I'm not really sure like why they are supported. So this looks like something we're not using anyway, or it's like so rarely, it occurs so rarely that maybe we should question, like, why does that exist? I don't know why we have this S3 multi-part route, for instance.
We have, I forgot exactly which feature was that, but that one you should talk with Alessio about when he's back next.
Okay, yep.
Because I think that was not a small item.
Got it.
That we used. I forgot what it was exactly. I think we have it even in documentation somewhere. But I think if you have a link to the version ping Sisense chart, that would be very useful for me to actually understand. If we have a mention of OpenStack, that's probably better than nothing. I can then go and figure out where to go with this information. So to put it like this, we might need to work with product to deprecate this. So deprecation means announcing that we will be removing this in a future release. Whether we remove it in 15.0 or not, it doesn't really, right? It matters, but we are so close to 15.0 that, right, like we can do only so much.
Right.
But the important part is that we start working on the deprecation right now, which requires a whole story of, gathering some data, preparing some of this work with products, putting a stop on possible expansion on top of that, configuration, and so on and so on. So there's quite a lot of work to be done there. And if we, through the data we collect, find that the usage is small, we might want to ask for an exception to the 2 release policy and just do a 1 release and say, in 14.10, we announced that this is going out. We don't know yet whether we're going to postpone major release. No one said anything about this, but prior 2 major releases got pushed out by 1 month for various reasons. So I wouldn't be surprised if, a removal that we need to happen doesn't get scheduled in time, or we miss it for whatever reason, and we decide as a company to push things out for a month. Again, it happened 2 years in a row. I'm not really sure whether that should happen in the 3rd year in a row, but I would like us to be prepared, because if that happens, then we can at least pull the plug on that. So
I actually had a question related to this, because Jacob also mentioned on Slack, is this really a deprecation? Because we're not removing OpenStack support, right? It's really just that they offer 2 different APIs. One is S3 compliant, and the other is an API called Swift. I only very briefly looked at this, so I'm not totally sure what the history is behind that. But if we were to just say, well, we keep OpenStack support, but only via the S3 API, it does require customers to take action, right? If they have configured the Swift API, but it's not really a deprecation, right? Because we still support.
Just to be clear, deprecation is not removal. It is announcing that we are going to stop supporting this, whatever it is.
Right, but we would remove it in 15.0, right? That would be the plan.
That would be the plan, right? Sure. But the point is, if it's out there, if there is any data showing that the customers are using this, I don't know how we would make a distinction, but it's out there. We have it in our docs somewhere, probably. That means someone is using it. The XKCD comic, right? Like every change will break someone's workflow. So there is a chance that that will happen. We get customers responding when we do that. So anything that is out there and possibly being used needs to follow the process if we change certain things. So if we change the API for whatever reason, I don't know, rename a field or whatever, that's a breaking change. And we need to announce this, or we need to support things in parallel for a bit to give folks a chance, or customers a chance to do this. So I know we're talking about semantics here, but at the same time, we are here to help our customers. And if anyone is using this, we probably want to give them a chance.
No, that's a fair, definitely.
So again, if we have any data that tells us we haven't had a usage ping, or I don't know exactly what, a mention, a user asking a question about this in like years, there's a high chance that no one is actually using this and no one will care. At the same time, we need to at least attempt to follow the process of deprecation/removal in order to actually avoid any challenges there. So I guess my point here is, like, if we have those 2 different things, if you want to do one item or announce one item as no longer supported, let's write it up immediately. Let's write up what the impact will be, right? Like if you're using OpenStack this way, this would stop working for you once we remove this. And today is the 22nd, unfortunately, right?
I believe that. Yeah.
So, how would I do this? If you write something up right now, right, like in the next couple of hours, a short snippet, and I find someone who would be able to, if they're willing to edit our blog post to go out today, we could then be right under the 2 release deprecation rules. So if we are sure that we want to do this, and this is the big blocker. So if you can take an action with Jakob today, right, like in the next couple of hours, actually, to have something. So maybe you can start writing up why we want, like, what is the impact of this? confirming with him, and I can figure out whether I can find someone who would add something to the blog post. The blog post goes out in what? Pretty much 5-6 hours, 7 hours. Theoretically, if we have some text in 3 hours, I can start pinging people, see whether they would be willing to add something more to the blog post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can do that. I actually, I just recently closed this one out because it seemed to be duplicating another issue which had more information on it. Set object source direct upload to on as default kind of means that it would not be using background upload. And there wasn't a whole lot of discussion in here, but maybe we can just revive this because it's a bit more specific. It's actually 3 years old. So it looks like there were multiple attempts being made at deprecating this, and for different reasons, it just never happened. So maybe I can just reopen this and add more information to this to inform what needs to happen here.
Yeah, let's give it a shot. I cannot guarantee anything, but let's try to give it a shot at least.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. I need to drop off for my next call. Matthias, thank you so much for the discussion. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Of course.
Cool. All right.
See you. Bye.
See ya. Bye.